Hi everyone, I'm Helen from Susan's family. Today I'm bringing you the Cozy Critters fawn version. It's divided into two main parts, the main part and decorations. First, crochet the main part. Once completed, make the decorations and attach them. Let's start crocheting the main part. Begin with a chain stitch, then work in rounds for a section. After that, work back and forth. Let's take a look at the chart. In the chart, R plus number indicates the round number. H plus number indicates the row number. The increases and decreases explanation column shows the stitch techniques needed when crocheting the current round. It also explains the increasing or decreasing. The total stitches column shows the total number of stitches after completing all stitch patterns for that round. The stitch techniques used include chain, CH, F double crochet, FV double crochet increase, and slip stitch. Next, please watch my demonstration of the specific crocheting method. The yarn used for the main part here is special. This yarn has longer fibers. It's hard to see the stitches clearly when crocheting. I'll first demonstrate the crocheting method using cotton yarn. Then I'll explain the using the corresponding yarn. Everyone can learn the method first, or practice with yarn that's easier to watch. After learning, you can use the corresponding yarn for crocheting. Also, the yarn color here is random. For specific yarn, color scheme and hook size, please refer to the detail page of our product and paper instructions. First, let's cast on. The chart shows 3ch, which means the casting on method is chain cast on. Then cast on 3 stitches. Let's start with chain cast on. Pick up the yarn with your right hand. Wrap it around your left little finger once. Pass through between middle finger and index finger. Pinch the yarn tail with your left thumb and middle finger. Pick up the crochet hook with your right hand. The hook moves between these 2 points. Position the hook underneath the yarn. Wrap the yarn counterclockwise. Pinch the crossing point of the loop with your left thumb and middle finger. Then position the hook to the left of the yarn. Wrap the yarn counterclockwise. Pull through the loop. Tighten the yarn tail. Note: keep the loop on the hook slightly loose. This makes it easier for crocheting later. This slip knot does not count as a stitch. You can also start with a slip knot method. Cross the yarn tails. Then from underneath the loop, pull the yarn through. Then place the loop of the slip knot onto the hook. Adjust slightly. Hold the yarn with your left hand as before. Now begin crocheting chain stitches. Yarn over. Pull through. 1 chain stitch is done. On this chain stitch, pick up the V-shaped loop. Pick up both strands of the chain stitch. Place a stitch marker to mark it. Continue yarn over. Pull through. This is the second stitch. We need to crochet 3 stitches here in total. Crochet 1 more stitch. Now the starting chain is completed. Each chain here represents 1 stitch. The loop on the hook is not counted in the stitch count. The starting chain explanation is complete. Begin the first round. R1 is DC and the third chain from hook, 12 DC. It means starting crocheting from the third chain. The number before DC indicates how many double crochets to make. Here it means to crochet 12 double crochets. First find the position of the third chain from the end, which is actually the first chain stitch of the starting chain. Count from right to left to verify. 1, 2, 3. It's still this chain stitch. So we pick the space where the stitch marker is placed. Work 1 double crochet, first the loop on the hook, which means picking this chain. Place a marker to mark it. Pay attention not to include this crocheted yarn when placing the marker. Then yarn over once. Insert into the corresponding position. Yarn over and draw through. There are 3 loops on the hook now. Yarn over and draw through the first 2 loops. 2 loops remain. Continue to yarn over and draw through in once. The double crochet is completed. Here is the marker spot. The V-shaped loop is the stitch of the double crochet. 1 stitch represents 1 stitch. Continue to pick up the same position below. Crochet 11 double crochets. I'll demonstrate the technique for double crochet again. Yarn over. Insert. Yarn over and draw through. Then yarn over and draw through the first 2 loops. Repeat twice. Once. Twice. Complete the double crochet. Continue crocheting 10 double crochets afterward. One stitch. Two stitches. Three stitches. Nine stitches. 10 stitches. Adding the previous 2 stitches. A total of 12 double crochets completed. Check the stitch count after completing. The stitch pattern corresponding to the chart is now done. Remove the stitch marker at the insertion point. Finally, at the stitch of the first double crochet, which is the position marked by the stitch marker. Work 1 slip stitch to join. Insert the hook. Yarn over and pull through. Pull through all loops on the hook in once. Complete the slip stitch. The braid on the upper right. Is the braid formed by the slip stitch? The slip stitch doesn't count as one stitch. Need to tighten its braid. Then tighten the loop on the hook. This makes the right braid smaller. The slip stitch is not indicated in the form. Actually, when crocheting in rounds, always finish by joining with a slip stitch and tighten. Here the starting yarn tail is not handled yet. It can be used to distinguish the right side from the wrong side. The side with the starting yarn tail is the wrong side of the fabric. And the stitch texture is relatively blurry. Conversely, it's the right side. At this point, the first round is complete. Next, crochet round 2. R2 is 2ch 12 DC 2 in 1. DC means double crochet, the number before indicates how many double crochet 2 in 1 to make. Here it means to make 12 double crochet 2 in 1. Pick up the yarn from the previous round. First, make 2 turning chains as beginning chain. 1, 2. The turning chain doesn't count as one stitch, not included in the total stitch count. Then place a marker on the entire loop on your hook. This way, after completing the corresponding stitches, the marker position will exactly be at the stitch position of the corresponding stitch. Pick up the marker position from the previous round. The spot where you joined with a slip stitch earlier. Work a double crochet 2 in 1, which means making 2 double crochets in one position. One stitch. At this point, the marker marks its stitch position. Continue crocheting 2 stitches. Complete the double crochet increase. You can remove the marker here. Continue picking up the left stitch afterward. Work a double crochet 2 in 1. After completing, you'll need to work 10 more double crochet increases downward, all following the method of making 2 double crochets in each stitch. Complete the last double crochet increase. Check the stitch count. Note that the turning chain doesn't count as one stitch. The total stitches for each round are clearly marked in the corresponding chart. I won't mention this again later. Finally, at the marked position, work a slip stitch to join. Insert the hook. Yarn over and draw through. Pull through all loops on the hook. Complete the slip stitch. Similarly, tighten the braid. The second round is complete. Work round 3 downward. Chain 2 to begin. The following chart is FFV X1 2. The parentheses here indicate a group. Multiply by the number indicates the number of times to repeat the pattern. Work 1 double crochet, pay attention to mark before crocheting. Pick up loops, and mark before working the first stitch. I won't remind you repeatedly later. Insert the hook into the stitch marker position of the previous round and crochet accordingly. Remove the stitch marker after completing it. Work 1 double crochet 2 in 1 next. A group FFV is completed. I'll demonstrate once more. Work 1 double crochet. Then work 1 double crochet 2 in 1. This is the second time. Repeat FFV 10 more times. All following the method of 1 double crochet 2 in 1. Finally, pick up the marked position, and join with a slip stitch. Pull tight. The third round is complete. Now work the fourth round. Chain 2 as beginning chain. Crochet the stitch pattern within parentheses. Work 1 double crochet. Then work 1 double crochet 2 in 1. Work 1 more double crochet. FFV F is completed. I'll demonstrate again. 1 double crochet. 1 double crochet 2 in 1. 1 double crochet. This is the second time. Continue to repeat the stitch pattern within parentheses. Complete the required number of times. After finishing all, join with a slip stitch. Pull tight. The fourth round is completed. Move on to the fifth round. Work even for this round. Chain 2 as beginning chain. Then pick up stitches 1 stitch to another and work double crochets. Check the stitch count after completing, same as the previous round. Then slip stitch at the marked position. Pull tight. The 5th round is completed. For the remaining part, work back and forth. Meaning no need to join with a slip stitch at the end. Continue the numbering from previous. Next is row 6. Start with 2 chains as beginning chain. Here the beginning chain corresponds to the previous round's beginning chain. The chart shows turn, indicating to turn the fabric. Turn counterclockwise. Then pick up stitches to the left. Work the corresponding number of double crochets. Continue all the way down to the position before the previous round's beginning chain, which is the position marked by the stitch marker. Finish at the marked position. At this point, this row is completed. No need to join with a slip stitch. This creates an opening at the beginning and end. Row 6 is done. Here you can remove the stitch marker. Then proceed to row 7, using the same method. Start with 2 chains as beginning chain. Then turn the fabric. Begin from the stitch at the edge of the first row. Work a double crochet into each stitch in sequence. Continue crocheting until next to the beginning chain of the previous row, which is before the opening. When reaching the beginning chain of the previous row, no need to crochet. The stitch count for this row is identical to the previous row. At this point, row 7 is completed. For the remaining rows, continue crocheting using the same method as row 7. During the last few rows, change colors. When counting row numbers or rounds here, count each raised texture. One raised texture represents a round or a row. The swatch currently has 7 raised textures. When encountering insufficient yarn while crocheting, I'll demonstrate the method using a swatch. Pay attention, always join yarn on the double crochet. First work an incomplete double crochet, yarn over the hook once. Insert. Yarn over and pull through. Yarn over and draw through the first 2 loops. 2 loops remain. That's an incomplete double crochet. Then take the new yarn. Leave a little yarn tail. Yarn over and pull through. Completed the double crochet, and completed joining the yarn. Tie a knot to secure both yarn tails on the wrong side of the fabric. Leave the yarn tails on the wrong side of the fabric for now. Continue crocheting normally. This is the method for joining yarn. I'll demonstrate the color change method using a swatch below. After completing the rows of the corresponding color, chain 1 to secure. Leave a little yarn tail. Cut the yarn. Then take the new color. Place the yarn tail from the end of the previous row on the right side. Then insert the hook into the stitch of the edge. Hang the new yarn on the left hand. Leave a little yarn tail. Yarn over and pull through. Chain 2 to begin. Crochet accordingly below. When crocheting, you can place both yarn tails above the hook. Weave in the ends as you go along. Or tie a knot and place them in position. Then hide them into the fabric later. This is the method for changing colors. After completing all the work, break the yarn. Then weave in the yarn tail into the fabric. Here I'll demonstrate the method of weaving in ends, on the wrong side of the fabric. Follow the stitch pattern to weave in the tail. You can weave in for several more stitches. Cut off the remaining yarn tail. Handle the other yarn tails using the same method. At this point, the crocheting method for the main part is complete. Moving forward, I'll use the original yarn. Let's go over some things to pay attention to while crocheting. First is the foundation chain. The yarn might be hard to see here, so watch carefully as you work. Crochet a bit slower. Start with the same method demonstrated earlier using cotton yarn. Chain cast on. Then chain 3. After completing the first chain, you can feel where the loop underneath the hook is the first chain stitch. Feel with your hands, there will be small holes. Place a stitch marker on the first stitch. We'll place it directly into the hole. Continue crocheting chains. 2 chains. 3 chains. Let's feel the chain stitches again. When touching continuously, there will be a bump between every 2 chain stitches. The indented hole position is where the chain stitch is. The starting chain is now complete. Next, pick up the small hole position of the first chain stitch. Crochet 12 double crochets. Since it's hard to find the stitches later, we need to mark every stitch here. First, place a stitch marker on the loop on your hook. Insert a stitch marker. To make it easier to distinguish the marker spot on our first stitch marker, add another stitch marker. The stitch position with 2 stitch markers is the first stitch. Pick down to the stitch marker of the first chain. Work 1 double crochet. When crocheting here, you can feel and crochet at the same time. Crochet slowly, yarn over. Insert. Yarn over and pull through. If you want it looser here, you can enlarge the loop. Conversely, pull the yarn shorter. You can check or feel it. There are 3 loops on the hook. Then yarn over and draw through the first 2 loops. Two loops remain. Yarn over and draw through in once. This completes 1 double crochet. The position marked by the stitch marker now is the stitch of this double crochet. Feel the marked position with your hands. It's a small dent. The lower left of the hole feels firm. This is the post of the double crochet. The upper right feels softer. This is the double crochet stitch. Place a stitch marker on the loop on the hook. Then at the same insertion point, make 1 double crochet. Before each subsequent stitch, you need to pick up the entire loop and place a stitch marker. The second marker position is the stitch of the second double crochet. Continue to complete the remaining stitches. Now there are 3 stitch markers, meaning 3 stitches have been completed. After finishing, check the stitch count. Simply count the number of stitch markers here. The first stitch is at the position of the first 2 markers. Then remove the stitch marker from the previous insertion point. At this point, the stitch pattern in the chart is done. Down to the position with 2 stitch markers. Join with a slip stitch. Insert into the chain space of the marker. Work the stitch. After completing, pull tight. At this point, the first round is complete. To make it convenient for checking the round count later, place a stitch marker in any one stitch on this side. Continue crocheting round 2. First chain 2 as beginning chain. Then at the position below with 2 stitch markers. Work DC 2 in 1. This round still requires marking every stitch. Place 2 stitch markers at the first stitch position. Crochet accordingly. finish crocheting the corresponding position of the marker, the stitch marker below can be removed. Down to pick up the stitch marker position from the previous round. Evenly work DC2 in 1. When reaching the position of 2 stitch markers, now check the stitch count. The stitch count in the chart is completed. Then at the first stitch, which is the position with 2 stitch markers, join with a slip stitch. Pull tight. This completes round 2. Similarly, mark any one stitch in this round. You can feel it here. You can mark one stitch above the marked spot from the previous round. Convenient for later checking. For round 3 and onwards, use the same method. After completing the turning chain, follow the chart to crochet the corresponding stitches. Place 2 stitch markers at the first stitch position. Place 1 stitch marker after each stitch thereafter. Underneath where you completed the corresponding stitch, you can remove the stitch markers after finishing. Once you're more experienced with crocheting, you don't need to mark every stitch. For example, mark every 3rd stitch, or mark every 5th stitch. Here I'll demonstrate round 3, using the method of marking every 5th stitch. First make the turning chain. Then follow the chart to crochet 4 stitches. Still place 2 markers at the first stitch. Now I've completed 4 stitches. Mark the 5th stitch position below. Continue using the same method afterward. Crochet 4 stitches done. Remember the stitch just completed is the 5th stitch position. Crochet 4 stitches from this stitch. Mark the next stitch after completing. Left side of the previous stitch marker to the current marker position. That's 5 stitches. You can also feel it or part the fibers. You'll see a general braid pattern. Continue crocheting using this method. Also, if the previously completed stitch pattern. If you're unsure what stitch was crocheted, feel it. Only one firm stitch column. That is the stitch post, meaning one stitch was crocheted. Below in a chain space. Drawing through to create 2 stitch posts, that's an increase. After finishing the last stitch marker of the previous round, remove the stitch marker. Down to the 2nd stitch marker position at the 1st stitch. Now let's check the stitch count. Starting from the 2nd stitch marker on the left side. There are 5 stitches between each marker. Let's count the number of stitch markers. There are 7 stitch markers here, meaning up to this marker position. There are 35 stitches total. plus the last crocheted stitch makes 36 stitches altogether. Match the stitch count with the chart. Finally, at the position of the 2 stitch markers, which is the first stitch, join with a slip stitch. Pull tight. The third round is complete. Mark each completed round afterward. Similarly, mark above the previous marker position. If stitch markers run out later, use other colors for marking. Cut a piece of yarn. Then from the position that needs marking, pick up approximately 1 corresponding stitch. Draw the yarn through. Then tie a knot with the yarn tail. This is the method of marking with yarn tails. For the fourth round afterward, you can crochet following the marking method of the third round. If you really can't find the exact position, we can work within a specific area. Crochet the corresponding number of stitches. It's okay if the insertion point is slightly off within the corresponding area. Here I'll demonstrate the method using the fourth round. First, make the beginning chain. In the previous round, there were 5 stitches between my stitch markers. So I'll pick 5 insertion points between them. Refer to the chart for the stitch pattern. Complete this area first. Meanwhile, during this round of crocheting, you should still mark every 3 or 5 stitches. I'm still crocheting by marking every 5 stitches. Work 1 double crochet. The first stitch should always be marked, and it's distinguished with 2 stitch markers. Crochet 1 double crochet 2 in 1 next. Insert the hook into the small hole here. Pay attention to the small hole near the fabric's edge. Part the fibers to check. You can faintly see a braid-like texture. Continue with 1 double crochet. Mark it afterward. Work 1 double crochet adjacent. When you reach the stitch marker position, correspondingly make a double crochet increase here. In this end area, Insert the hook into 5 stitch positions. Repeat this process afterward. Continue crocheting. Insert the hook into roughly corresponding small holes. You can also check the stitch count by feeling the small holes. Take it slow while crocheting. The insertion point can be roughly corresponding. Complete the corresponding number of stitches. Now you've reached the starting position. Let's check it. If you make a mistake in stitch techniques while crocheting, it's okay, as long as the final stitch count matches the total stitches. Work a slip stitch at the beginning position downward. Pull tight. The 4th round is completed. Once you're skilled at crocheting, you can also feel it by touch. The fabric will have a bumpy texture. The raised parts that feel firm represent 1 round. The dents are the holes. We can also count the holes. One hole represents 1 round. Since everyone's tension varies, check the dimensions against the chart after finishing the 4th round. If the dimensions differ significantly, it's recommended to adjust your tension and recrochet. For the 5th round, work even without increasing or decreasing. This ensures the stitch markers align perfectly between the 2 rounds. Then follow the back and forth method, also working even without increases or decreases. You can mark the first stitch of every row and every round. When crocheting back and forth, end at the first marked stitch of the previous row, indicating the completion of a row. When the yarn runs out while crocheting, you can join yarn using incomplete stitches. The method is identical to the cotton yarn demonstration. When changing colors, follow the color change method shown with cotton yarn. Finally, cut the yarn after completing the work, and weave in all yarn tails on the wrong side of the fabric. This concludes the crochet method for the original yarn. At this point, the main part is completely explained.